Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, mastering the art of fire service leadership.
Where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining. Good morning or afternoon or evening, whenever time you are listening to us on the Heat of Command podcast today. Thank you for joining us. And I have to start off and preface this episode with two things. A, I am on call, so if I have to run out, you get to hear from just Kyle today, but hopefully I get to stay for the whole episode. And number two, a little cranky. Our well is having issues and we have no water at my house. And so, yeah, that's always fun to deal with. So
half the people are like, what's a well?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do not live in an area with hydrants or access to the water system. So I am on a well and have a septic system. So that's exciting stuff. But yeah, let's get in today on a topic. It's a phrase that I hear in the fire service sometimes, and definitely we have heard it in the business world. But what do you do with a culture of yes men? Or yes, women, if we want to be politically correct. Yes, people. And what we're talking about today is when you surround yourself as a leader with people that are considered yes men, A, it might feel secure to you, but B, what is that doing for your organization? And how do you get out of that? How do you create a culture and a group, a healthy group dynamic where people are comfortable to disagree, people are comfortable to have healthy disagreements and to not battle, but to really talk through hard stuff and work down into the nitty-gritty details and get away from a yes man culture so that you can make change and you can really get to the heart of issues and leave a meeting or leave a group and leave that there, right? Because I've seen this happen where people speak out in meetings or at their firehouse and they disagree and then they leave the room and people talk trash about them, right? Or they leave the room and they feel so terrible about that experience that they never want to disagree again. So we just perpetuate this cycle of yes men. So you want a culture where people can speak up, disagree with you, disagree maybe with the whole room, and disagree with the group, and then talk through things and then leave it there. And then it's done, and a healthy group can leave it all there and turn around and go to lunch together, right? And not trash each other for not thinking the same way or having a different solution to something, right?
Yeah. And I think for context purposes, when we discuss yes men, it's it could be a couple of things where it's just go with the flow. It is what it is. I don't have the ability to change it, so whatever, right? Or it's an organization where it's based off of fear and intimidation, so you might be too afraid to say something. You might be too afraid to say something for numerous reasons. The backlash you might get, the talking behind your back, the simple no and not being heard, even though you might have a great idea. And I think, again, not just in the fire service, these types of environments are plentiful in every group and organization around the world. So, it's times change. And I think it's very important that we constantly are progressing the way we do things. And just because this is the solution or what we're talking about today doesn't mean 10 years from now, this is what we're going to be talking about. It should be different. Hopefully we've crossed some of these bridges and we're able to adapt to new people coming in and what they want out of their leadership. But I think in today's day and age, people want that collaborative atmosphere. And I think it has a spot in the fire service, in many arenas within the constructs of our job, whether it be in the four walls of the firehouse, some intense emergency scenes where it's not so black and white and we need to collaborate to come to a solution. So I think this benefits in so many different ways. And I think the three things that maybe that we're going to hit on today is like why it matters to ditch this yes men mentality, where where it kind of clashes and the hardships you're going to face when maybe you try to implement that, and then how to play it out. Like, how do we get there to have that type of environment? So, you started right away, Carrie, on talking about, why it matters and the things that will benefit us, things like better decision making. When we're innovative and collaborative, we can thrive and progress an organization much faster. And I think most importantly, out of all the things, it builds trust from the top down and the down and from the down up, right? It builds trust all along the spectrum within every rank and file of your organization. And when you can build that kind of trust, you become a force to be reckoned with as an organization. And I think that's when you can have open dialogue about things, not get defensive, listen to somebody, maybe take them up on what they have to offer. Maybe it's a better idea than yours. And just because they're a lower rank, you give them the credit for it, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit, but I think the biggest one would be that trust just you would skyrocket in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're not creating a place where people feel comfortable voicing opinions or throwing out different ideas, that trust is definitely diminished. And also if you're surrounding yourself with people who think the same way and only think that way, I think there is so much greater risk for failure
Yeah.
and whatever your decision is, because if you don't have some people in your corner, in your close group that that think a little differently and are going to give you a different perspective, and you're only running it by this group of people that kind of think the same way, when you release that idea or that decision to the masses, there are going to be people out there that think differently and they're going to see through it, and it sets you up. I think it sets you up for failure i- if you're only surrounded by people that think the same way, and even people that, always tell you what you want to hear. Like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great." Or, "This guy's the smartest guy in the room, so I'm not going to disagree with him because obviously he's smarter than I am or girl, and so I don't want to disagree with him and look stupid." But then there's holes in the decision, or there's more things to be thought through. So yeah, that trust, and you bring up the defensive part of this too. And if you are constantly defensive when people have a different perspective or challenge you a little bit on things, eventually people will stop. And that's definitely not the direction you want to go in. People will say, every time I try to bring up another point or side, somebody gets defensive. Meh, I'm just not going to anymore.
Yeah, you get done with that. It's almost there's a few things that I want to hit on that you said, with the defensiveness, and you see that, right? Like that's your first sign, and it's something we talk about and preach is, emotional intelligence. And when you get that initial reaction of defensiveness, there is a low level of emotional intelligence. So knowing that going in, is there a better approach to get your point across? Because sometimes when you start realizing the challenges that you're going to face, and you're going to face those defensive mechanisms, because people have a low emotional intelligence or don't even know what that is, you still have an ability to grow as a leader, because this is going to challenge you to adapt your approach to still get through to them, even though they still might get slightly defensive, right? So keeping
Well, yeah, and
conversations. Go ahead.
yeah, and I would say too, to go a little further into that, is your decision or your idea may be great. It may be absolutely super well thought out. You've thought of every angle, but when you deliver it and somebody comes to you with some challenges or questions and, well, what about this? Or why can't we do this? And then you're defensive to them. eh, It's usually a lack of understanding. So I see this at admin a lot, because, we're surrounded by all this information, right? So I usually have a lot of the information to make a decision, right? But if you're out at a fire station, you might not have access to all that information. You haven't heard the whole story while we're trying to make this decision. And then you're like, well, why didn't we do this? Or why can't we do this? And then if I immediately am like, you don't understand because of this, this, and this, and this, it's like, well, that's not your fault. You didn't know, right? That's not your fault. You didn't have that information. So people in administrative positions and especially executive leadership positions, you have to be very, very careful not to shut people down and by getting defensive if they don't know the whole story. They wouldn't know the whole
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I think
Right. That was a side.
oh, no, it leads right into, teams and people respect someone who listens. And when you're listening, you're not getting defensive, right? Because you truly want to listen, even when it hurts, even when it's the stuff you don't want to hear, even if it's calling yourself out. They're trying to politely call you out or tell you what's not working, but they respect someone who listens over someone who just wants a cheerleader or someone just say yes and go with the flow. So you want to build your respect, listen to your people. And that's going to be the first and foremost. Don't get defensive. Don't, you know, I, there was a time I had a chief that would always throw his 5 bugle rights. And I was like, if you're a chief and you say you're using your 5 bugle rights, like you need to leave this job immediately. That's insane to me, right? Like who would ever say that and think that's okay and is in a leadership role? So, it's going to hurt. The hard truths are going to hurt. But if you're open minded and want to listen, like so much growth is going to come from that. And when we look at growth and how we can rapidly progress an organization, when we're able to allow people to speak up and critique and get involved in every aspect of an organization and the issues and everything, you're going to grow so much faster because discussion fosters creativity. Non intimidating environments fosters trust and respect. And when you can have those kinds of open conversations, like the sky's the limit. You can achieve so much, but when it's so rigid, when it's so it's this way or the highway. It's always the same. We're afraid to change, afraid to take in new opinions. You're just stunting growth of an organization. And, we just see a lot of that. So, there's so many reasons why this matters.
Yeah, and I think and we talk about self-awareness and self-reflection a lot on here, and I think this falls hand in hand with that, that for me personally, when I've had the hardest time with people disagreeing with me or challenging me, it's been in times when it's on a topic or area where my confidence is lacking. So, if I'm pretty confident in something, bring on the discussion, right? Bring it on. Let's get down deep into this. But if it's something I'm not confident in, that's where I'm like, "Ugh, why are you giving me such a hard time about this?" And I think I've come a long way, but I definitely see that in some people I've had interactions with that leaving meetings and they're like, "Oh, man, that was a tough meeting, like, we were all arguing," and I'll leave the meeting and I'm like, "I thought that was a great meeting, we really felt comfortable getting into it," we really felt comfortable, disagreeing and working through stuff and solving problems, but it's not that way for everybody on every topic, right? And that's just some self-awareness stuff that I think comes into this too. And so
Yeah.
I have to tell myself that, like, "Hey, it's okay for them to be disagreeing and challenging you. You just gotta live in it."
Yeah, it comes down it's almost ego versus openness, right? I mean, and that's what it is. And I think old school mentality is that this, having an atmosphere that's collaborative and stuff can weaken authority or redefine it. And I don't think it weakens it. I think it encourages a more thoughtful process in decision making. It's not handing over power, which I think is also looked at like if I'm not making the decisions or this isn't coming from me, then it's not a very authoritative because it didn't come from me. And like 9 times out of 10 or most times I'm always like, you take all the credit from I don't need the credit to get things done. Like my name doesn't need to be tied. If you're all about boosting your own ego more, like take all the credit, don't care. So like it's just it's when we sit here and talk about this, it's like so crazy because some of this stuff is just so simple, but yet it's so entrenched in the culture of the way things are. And especially you throw paramilitary organization and rank and chain of command and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, yes, there is time and a place for all of that. And we're going to hit a little bit on that. But like, come on, if people are willing to want to progress an organization and lead within the four walls of the firehouse, and even on, again, even like I said, on those tough scenes that we have to go on that take a collaborative approach. Like, can you listen to somebody else? Just because you're a ranking officer out there on a traumatic scene, maybe there's a 5-year person there who's been on something similar that can offer up something. Are you open to that? And I think we should be, because if our goal is to save lives and property, like, we want to get it done as soon as possible. And I think sometimes getting more heads together is beneficial. Obviously, sometimes no. Sometimes it is a command and control. And when there is a time crunch, like in the heat of the battle, and somebody hanging out a second story window, and it's a single line fire, like, yeah, it's a command control. Do this, let's go. And I totally get that, right? But we build that trust and respect back at the firehouse when we're able to open it up and let people talk and share their opinions, share their thoughts. And you know what? I'm going to go one step further. I think it's very important that when, we're talking about, don't be yes men, yes women, don't be that, and be collaborative and share your thoughts and opinions. I think it's very important for leadership to accept maybe some of the ideas, the strategies that are coming from the younger people, even if they might not be the best. Like, they're slightly off, a slight change, but it's not anything that's safety or operational. Like, utilize it as a learning experience. Like, be like, all right, I'll implement that, but you need to be ready for this, this, and this to maybe go wrong. And if it does, I'll help you through it. Right? Like, that's where you get this mentorship, and like, you allow people to grow as leaders, like, let them fail in a safe environment. Let them have their ideas shared throughout an organization and see what happens and take ownership of that. Like, that's huge. You can really build some people up. So, I'm not saying allow them to completely rewrite your SOPs or SOGs, whatever you call them, but like, give them an opportunity to do something, if they want just something, and let them run with their idea, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking craziness.
No, no, and I'll some examples of some things we've done to kind of foster some of that is work groups that we've had lately to create new programs. So we've created an acting battalion chief program where you get cleared to ride as the acting battalion for the day, and we've done like a new driver pump operator release program, and that has a boot camp component. And we're working now at aerial operator program. And so when we were bringing people in for these work groups, it's a mix of people from the department, and you know they originally were like, "Yep, you got to have this many years before you can do this program. You've got to have this much stuff, this much experience first before you can do this." And it's like, okay, in the perfect fire department world, that would be so good because you would only want people that are like this much experience, this much training, and we would say, "Okay, let's play that out for real because we don't disagree with you that all of that stuff would be wonderful, but let's play it out."
Mhm.
And then work through it with them. What happens if you limit that? And if our goal last year was to create more driver pump operators for the engine, because we have such a new department and we had enough bodies on shift. We just didn't have enough drivers. So it's like, all right, this is our goal and this is what we want to do. But if we limit this, these are all the people that we eliminate. And then we would say, do you think such and such would be okay? And be like, oh, yeah, yeah, he's great. I'm like, okay, well, you eliminated him. What about her? Do you think she's ready? Oh, yeah, she'd be a great operator. Okay, well, you eliminated her. And they're like, oh, because it's just but it was really cool, like, a really cool process to work through, and then it helps people for succession planning. Like, okay, I can't just make a decision based on what I think would be the best. I have to actually work through, like, how does that decision affect us in 1 year? in 5 years, in 10 years. You gotta play it all the way out, and it's really good for succession planning to do that too.
Yeah, and it builds critical thinking in your younger people. Like, there's so many
Yeah, yeah.
benefits. Like, tell me one bad thing about it. You don't get to make the overall decision as ranking person. Like, that's it. Yeah, it's like awesome, and it's an encouraging, motivating, empowering atmosphere. And when you have that type of atmosphere, man, people can really, really, the sky's the limit for them in their career and as a person, growth, everything. And it's so cool to be able to see that. And I think as a leader, being able to see somebody strive and reach heights that you never could reach is pretty amazing.
And
Because
when
let's
you're
face.
feeding people more information, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you go.
Like, when you're feeding more people more information about why decisions were made, then they can take that out and pass that on too. Because
Mhm.
what if we had, you know, all these programs we're creating, we just said, "Nope, you know, we're decreasing the amount of time you have to have." They'd be like, "Oh," you know, if they didn't know the backstory, it would all be out there that, you know, we're letting anybody drive these trucks and there's no time requirement, and it's because we only want certain people to be able to do it. And but now they have all the information of why the decision was made, and so they can accurately tell everyone back at their shifts, like, hey, this is why this is happening, and we're trying to set ourselves up for success, moving forward. And then you also explain too, like, okay, if we don't have enough drivers, that's more mandatory. Are you okay with this many people have to be held mandatory every day? Okay, maybe you are okay with that. Maybe you're okay with that, you know, to a certain point, right? So it's just neat to include people in that kind of decision making stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's a lot of myths maybe to debunk or how this would play out in your organization. I think first of all, to realize that, the overall goal is progress, right? It is not for everybody to agree. And I think if you get in a room and everybody agrees, I'm not saying that that's not normal or, that won't happen. But if everybody's agreeing, is it because they really agree or it's just the easy way? It's a comfortable way. It's the way it's always been. And we're just going to go on. So the goal isn't to agree. The goal is for progress. And I think we need to keep that in the back of our minds if you're trying to implement stuff like this within your organization. And one thing that me and you always hit on is, and we've talked about, and we try to debunk, and we'll always try to debunk, is the needing for a safe space or we're getting soft. I think healthy debate is not coddling. And I think there's people in an older generation that would disagree. The it's my way or the highway. This is what happened to me. But healthy debate, I think, they may be more apprehensive for that healthy debate because it's raw and real, right? It is human beings sharing their values, what's important to them, how they see things. And it's being able to take that information and utilize it instead of defending against it. And I think that can be very challenging for a lot of people, especially when you don't have a lot of experience in doing that. And I think historically, when you look at the fire service, I don't think there's historically that type of atmosphere existed. And I think it's trying to exist in our organizations now. The other downfall is most people, as we've talked about, when you get in this career, like that is it, right? Your whole identity is this job and the people you talk with and do things with. So there's like this no outside influence to teach some of these things on healthy debate, how it's raw and real, it's not disrespectful, and how that is progress and how you can get progress utilizing that instead of this command control, it's my way or the highway. If you don't say yes and tell me what I want to hear, then we don't like you. So I think things are changing, which is cool to see. But in that growth, there's a lot of challenges that come with that. But it's healthy. I encourage your organizations to have these conversations and openness because you'll do very well, and it's not being disrespectful at all.
Yeah, and the caveat to that is also you have to deliver that in a way too, right? You
Mhm.
can't just
Oh yeah,
say, "Healthy debate, let me give it to you,"
correct.
right?
Yep.
Listen to what I there's a if you want people to listen to your devil's advocate position, there's a way to deliver that, right? Like, "Hey, let's talk about what I think we're missing," or hey, have we thought about this? Or my perspective is this, instead of, you know, because you don't want to immediately put people on the defensive, when you're trying to have that healthy debate. So I think it's in the messenger delivery method. I just made that up.
I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, I think yeah, you hit it, and it is for younger people to try and do this. You need to prepare yourself for how you like you said, the approach matters so much because if you approach this wrong and the second it gets personal, I think and we know in our profession especially, it can get personal very quickly. So we don't want it to go there at all. And how we approach this stuff to prevent defensiveness and openness as well is, keeping it general. So if you're talking about, for example, I recently brought up that a lot of issues in our organizations start and end with the officers. And I voiced that to all the officers, but it was all of us, including myself, right? And given an example of where I personally messed up. Like the only direct call out I did was of myself, right? We're not pointing fingers. Like you cannot point fingers. We have to look at, when we're looking at openness, and especially if you're like trying to shift a culture or do anything, you can't look backwards. That would be my biggest piece of advice. You can't look at what has been done or is being done, but you have to come up with a script or how you're going to approach it on what you want done. And like you start from today forward and not looking back. So the data supports where you want to go and you're not looking for data to not support what is already being done or has been done. The second we go backwards and question things that have already happened or the past, that's where defenses very easily can go up. When we look forward and you ask leading questions about things moving forward, you open a door for them to answer and not really get defensive over it. So something in the line of, do you feel that our employees are direct products of the leadership within an organization? Right? You can't get, how are you going to get defensive over that? You right? You're going to either say, well, yes or no. And, maybe, and if that's a simple answer, it's like, well, can you expound on that? So you think so, but how? You know, and that's not, not a lot of room to get defensive there. So it's those leading questions or open-ended questions. And again, looking forward and not looking back.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot, and not the comment about not looking for data to prove the other side. Like, prove where you wanna go and
Right.
and make decisions on that and not yes. That's such a more positive, optimistic outlook. Now, you do need people that are your devil's advocate people, right? You do need people that are willing to look at that other side to keep you, think just thinking through everything. Because and I've said this before that the shift from going from captain, fire captain, firefighter, paramedic, fire captain to a lot of the stuff I have to do now was so challenging for me because I was so like my mind was so wrapped around quick critical decision making, right? Rapid emergency response decision making. Problem A, fix it now. You may be solving a problem for an hour, right? Maybe a couple hours on something, something big, but then you were done, right? You were
Hmm.
on to the next thing. And then, here I am in this strategic positions where I have to, I'm still trying to make decisions that way. Like, okay, chief has given me this project. It's like, okay, I could be done with this in a week, maybe 2 days. And it's not that kind of decision making. It's slow, methodical. Have I thought through all the things? And that's when it's great to have someone in your group, in your circle that can be like, "No, Kerry, you didn't think of any of these things. You didn't think out this. Well, what if this happens? And have you have an assumption that this is what's right, but really the data shows this, or really in reality, this is what's going to happen. And so you've got to have those people.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's just more evidence on how open lines of communication and collaboration is beneficial, because you're going to have all those different types of people in the room that bring a certain strength and weakness to the table, but we can utilize all of it. And everybody has their place. Everybody's got a seat at the table. Do you allow them to sit at that table, right? Are you the organization that allows everybody to sit at that table when the time is right? Or no, is it just constantly command control and that's the way it's always been? One of the biggest things, we talk about trust and building trust. And, just a question for you to ponder and self reflect on. If employees don't trust leadership, how likely are they to give their best effort? And I think that's really important. And this is kind of how we battle that, how we build that trust to get that best effort. You create environments that people want to be a part of, that people feel connected to, like they have a say. They have some personal accountability to the growth and success of the organization. They're not just an employee. They have skin in the game, and allow them to have that skin in the game.
Yeah, if you look at, what people really want for employment, what do they want their employer in any industry? Like what draws them is they want to feel empowered.
Hmm.
They want to feel included, but really like pay is a big thing, right?
Yeah, oh,
But they
yeah.
really want to feel empowered and they want to feel challenged at work. And if you aren't providing opportunities for them to speak up and challenging them and asking them their opinions and involving them, yeah, that's the opposite of empowerment.
Right, right. And yeah, I understand why we are where we're at. Like, I get it. I understand how the workforce has been, and the characteristics of previous generations. Like, I get it. And sometimes, we do, it's like you pedal the metal, like, let's go, let's shift this. But change takes a long time, and changing strategies like this takes a long time, especially if maybe you're the boss in an organization and this is not something you're very comfortable with, but it is the right way. How are you going to continue to grow and learn to allow to have some of these types of collaborations to where we're giving the younger generation the things that they need to succeed?
Yeah, and I can see where, gosh, the fire service and just, I mean, every industry, but the fire service specifically, we have had so much challenge, right, in the last 10, 15 years that I could see where folks could get bitter and burnt out. And they're like, I'm just tired of having to change. I'm tired of as soon as we get something figured out, we have to change it again. And, you know, building culture and hiring the right people, and generations are constantly changing. And just when you kind of figure it out, you got to do it all over again. And I could see where people are like, just tell me what I want to hear. I'm tired of having to go through all of this. Just here's a decision, and you could get better. And I get that. So it's kudos. And I wish there was a better word than kudos. I feel like we use that too much, but like, good job to the people that are just doing it and they are just trying to make a difference. And there's so many people out there. I was in Virginia Beach last week for a class, and man, just some of the discussions from the senior leaders in that class. There was folks from Norfolk and Chesapeake, Hampton, James City, Virginia Beach. Just some of the officers in there are just incredibly smart executive leaders and just doing such good things. And it's like, whoo, yes, yes, like, good job.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope on the horizon, and a lot of progress that's happening, and it's cool to see. Sometimes I wish it happened quicker, but again, patience is a virtue as well, and we have to stay the course and put the time in and continue the efforts to create organizations like this, and as our job changes, as the challenges we face and the emergencies we respond to, as new generations continue to come into the workforce, as everything just constantly progresses at an alarming rate, we have to make sure that we as human beings and people are doing the same thing. We cannot stay stagnant in the way things were, in the way we used to lead people or the way we were led. It's redefining all these terms over and over again. And for our young listeners, I don't know what challenges you're going to face in 10 or 15 years, but I bet you it's not going to be collaboration. Well, hopefully, hopefully, right? We solve this one and, you're doing a better job and everybody's getting involved, but there's going to be constant things that we always have to address in every organization, in every part of society. And the one way to address those is to have a respectful team where trust is valued greatly and openness to really combat some of the issues that we face on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I wanna say too, if you're a volunteer or a volunteer organization and you're listening to us, the challenge is even harder for you
Oh, yeah.
guys. Like, we had a volunteer in this officer class that I'm talking about, and I was so impressed with some of the things they were doing as a volunteer organization that that mimicked career organizations, and I'm like, "Man, that's good stuff that they had implemented that were benefits for their volunteers and some policies that they had and just some good stuff." So I don't wanna leave you guys out because gosh, it's gotta even be harder, when we talk about this stuff for a volunteer organization.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't directly talk about that huge part
Yeah.
of our
We need
industry.
to get somebody we need to get somebody lots of somebodies from volunteer organizations on here and talk about the different struggles that they're experiencing
Yeah.
next
Yeah,
episode.
that'd be interesting. Interesting to hear.
Yes, it would. But this was good, Kyle. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely a good one.
Entertaining my crazy ideas.
It always goes, So, the encouragement is to open up your organizations, let people talk, let people have a voice. Young people challenge the old people respectfully, right? Open-ended questions, get them thinking, look forward, stop looking back. And that in and of itself is a huge, huge challenge, especially, you know, I don't want to get too much on a soapbox. I want to wrap it up, but especially for people who have some time on that have chips on their shoulders, rightfully so to have chips on your shoulders sometimes. Like I get it. We could get jaded very quick in this profession, and industries and organizations can do that to people. But if you really want to enact change and move forward, at some point you have to stop looking backwards and it's looking forward. Now, do you have the support in that and can you move it forward? Hopefully so, but just try to look forward sometimes. I don't know. It could be a challenge. So I
Yeah, and
get it.
I wanna give one concrete way maybe to start putting some of this into play for you, and this is something I did in 2023 or 2024. I think it was 2024. I can't remember now, but one of the years I said it was my year of yes because I felt like I was saying no all the time. So I said this is the year of yes. And anything somebody came to me for, they wanted to try to do or wanted to try to accomplish, I said yes. And then I had to figure out a way to make it work. And so it was an exhausting year, but I said yes to almost everybody. Like, you wanna try a new training program? You wanna Yep, but it's on you. You need to develop the curriculum, tell me how you're gonna pull it off, what resources do you need, send me an outline, send me a budget, and then I'm gonna help you do it. You wanna go attend this class? You need some money? All right, I'm gonna figure out how to get that money. We wanna purchase something that's in the training budget? All right, you need to let's figure out how to make it work, and then it just I had felt like I was saying no, and that I was like, "I need to shift my mindset. I wanna say yes." And so, I was a yes man, but in a different way.
Like Jim Carrey.
Yes. So, all right, well, thank you all for tuning in and sticking with us again. We appreciate the loyalty for our followers and our listeners. And we today are testing out some new software. Alitu, our podcasting software, as video. So you may see us from this. I'm not sure what we'll do with this, but we are starting to record video. So
We're
you
getting
may
big
see our
time now, Kerry.
Well, I have to remember to stop, like, making faces and, like All right. We'll see you guys next time.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
And Kerry.
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.